News with Lester.
Good evening. The chorus of protests over big money and hard times reverberated around the world today as tens of thousands took to the streets from across the U.S. to Europe and all the way to Johannesburg, railing against banks, corporate profits, and the wealthy. But it was in Rome that things turned violent, with reports of at least 70 injured, cars set afire, and banks firebombed. This day of global outrage was born of the nonviolent Occupy Wall Street movement that started here in New York. But it has easily found traction in parts of the world where folks are already simmering under the collar from harsh economic austerity measures. Collectively, their anger is clear, their specific demands less so. But nonetheless, they've got the world's attention. NBC's Keir Simmons leads off our coverage from London tonight.
This was the day protests on Wall Street went worldwide and in places turned violent. In Rome, some protesters interrupted a peaceful demonstration to smash bank windows and set fires. They were running battles with water cannon and tear gas. Reports say 20 were injured, protesters and police. Up to 100,000 have been expected for a demonstration inspired by events in America and fueled by anger at government cuts. In London, protesters were prevented from getting close to the stock exchange. There were 5 arrests, though the day was largely peaceful.
This is about some people having money and living good lives, some people not having money and suffering because of it.
A lot of people I work with have lost their jobs. My pension's been raided.
There are several thousand protesters here in London, part of a movement beginning in the United States, now spreading around the world. 5,000 gathered in Germany near the European Central Bank. The same slogans adopted in the US seen today in Germany and in Taiwan and in Australia. Messages that have gone global, spread through the internet.
We want an alternative, one that's based on human need and human rights, not on, corporate greed.
In Hong Kong, they lay on the sidewalk. In Paris, Poland and Portugal, small groups demonstrated. But in Spain, organisers estimated that 300,000 took to the streets of Madrid. Large numbers already furious over high unemployment there. Tonight, some streets in the Italian capital resemble a battlefield. Burnt-out vehicles include a police van. The Prime Minister called for arrests. The protesters calling for change around the world. Keir Simmons, NBC News, London.
And back here in New York, where all this began, around 24 people were arrested as protesters ventured from their Wall Street area encampment into the heart of Times Square, as this now month-old movement takes on an increasingly political tone over tax policies. NBC's Mara Schiavo-Campo was there this evening, and Mara, looks like one of the biggest gatherings we've seen yet.
Absolutely it is, Lester. It feels like New Year's Eve here in Times Square. Massive crowds have gathered for what is undoubtedly the Occupy Wall Street movement's largest event yet. Today, they occupied Times Square. Hundreds of Occupy Wall Street protesters gathered at the crossroads of the world for what organizers dubbed a party. End the war, tax the rich. Earlier, more than 1,000 demonstrated in Washington Square Park. And hundreds marched all over New York City in continued protest against big banks and what they say is an unfair economic system.
Kids can't work out of college. They have huge debts. Health care is non-existent for most people. It's off the charts. Libraries are closing. It's a bad time.
This is people from all walks of life, knowing that they have to fight for their country now or we're going to lose it.
All across the country, groups gathered as part of a global day of protest.
This is the time.
In Atlanta, 200 rallied at the Capitol.
Stand up!
Pittsburgh streets were closed to accommodate large crowds. Hundreds marched through downtown Phoenix. And in rural Alaska, one woman posted a Facebook photo of her solo protest with the caption, "Find your spot, occupy it."
We the occupiers!
Organizers say the nationwide events show just how far the movement has come in less than a month.
What we're doing here is affecting the whole world, and that is really powerful.
A new poll shows 54% of Americans view the Occupy Wall Street protests favorably. A majority also agree with one of their key issues. 73% favor raising taxes on those earning more than $1 million a year.
The Occupy Wall Street protesters have been successful at raising the issues of economic inequality and a broken political system to the national political establishment.
Now, despite the large crowds all around the country, experts note that the movement's real influence won't become clear until the election. Lester?
Morosky.